Welcome everybody to another book to game comparison video. Today I am looking at the latest Nancy Drew game and the book that it is based off of. And this game is Mystery of the Seven Keys. So if you are unfamiliar with my book to game comparisons, I'll give you a quick little rundown. I start by comparing the novel, which in this case is Diamond Deceit. It is book number 83 of the Nancy Drew files and was published in 1993. And I will be comparing it with the computer game, which of course is Mystery of the Seven Keys, and was released in 2024. A spoiler alert is in effect, of course, because I'm going to be going into the details of both the book and the game. That includes talking about the characters, the events, motivations, culprits, so on and so forth. So if you haven't played Mystery of the Seven Keys yet and you don't want to know really what happens or who's responsible for various activities, I suggest holding off from watching this video and coming back to me once you have played the game. So without further ado, let's begin the comparison. So I always start by looking at our source material, which in this case is a Nancy Drew file. It is book number 83 entitled Diamond Deceit. So in this story, Nancy and George have been invited by Bess to come to Carmel, California, where she had been holidaying with her parents. Her parents went back home early, and Bess was kind of keen to stay on, and she lets her friends know why a little while after they arrive. But first and foremost, she had an opportunity to help work as a pastry chef for their family friend Ted Menendez, and she's been having a lot of success with that. And what she shares with Nancy and George is that she plans to move to Carmel because she's had this wonderful experience. And she has a bit of a crush on Ted. There's a little bit of that as a motivator for her. But more than anything, it's because she's found this passion of hers and has found, again, this success. And Nancy and George want to be supportive friends, but they are a bit concerned by this move. It seems like a very hasty decision. But on top of that, they are concerned about Ted's behavior towards the girls as well as just to Bess. He appears to be a bit possessive. He's not very keen to have Nancy and George visiting and always seems to find a reason for Bess to be at work. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when I go through character breakdowns. Now, shortly after Nancy and George arrive in Carmel, they're doing some sightseeing and they learn about this diamond theft. They actually observe this encounter with one person threatening another about this, and what they learn is that movie star Joanna Burton had a necklace looked at by a couple individuals in the community, and what has happened is the diamonds from it have been replaced with cubic zirconia, which is fake. It's not real diamonds. And a young jeweler named Marcia is the one who's blamed for this by another jeweler, Cy Baxter. And Nancy is asked to investigate. So she's hoping for a little holiday, like Nancy always is. Those plans always fall through, but she agrees to look into matters. And as she meets with Marcia and talks with Cy, as well as other individuals in the community, she plans to meet with Joanna Burton. She has a quick phone call with her and arranges to meet with her to talk about this theft. So Nancy and George the following day plan to go to Joanna's house. When they get there, no one answers the door. And then Joanna's agent arrives, and so does a member from Seaside Security. This is a guard system in the community. And there's some concern, so the agent insists that Morgan, that's the security agent, that he opens the gate. And they're in a gated community. It's highly secure. They go and look around the property, and they can't find Joanna. And then they find her body down at the bottom of some steps that led from sort of a cliff face to the ocean. And she has died. And the circumstances are suspicious. So they wonder, did she fall? Or was she pushed? There's a tear in her clothing that suggests that maybe there was an altercation. So now Nancy's not only looking into this diamond theft, but also how did Joanna die? Why? Was it an accident? Was it murder? What happened? So she's looking into this as well. So as she's investigating, she learns that the gem business is really competitive. This community has two different businesses specializing in jewelry. And Nancy's not sure who to believe, like who can she trust of not just the people working with jewelry, but also other people in the community, those who are close to Joanna. And on top of this, she learns that Joanna Burton, famous though she may have been, has a history of not paying her bills. She actually owes money to Cy and Marcia. So is there a motivation because of her not paying people she owes? So another factor for Nancy to consider. So we've got quite a few characters. We'll start with Ted Menendez. So this is that friend of Bess. He runs the Café de Carmel, which is where Bess is working. And he's, as I noted, super possessive. And Nancy and George, as well as Bess, are staying with his parents. They are family friends of Bess's parents. Then we have Len Olson. So he's the fiance of Marcia Chung. He is a landscape architect, and he's the one who asks Nancy to investigate to help out Marcia, since she's the one who's being blamed for this theft. He also has a rather explosive temper, which is of great concern. Then we have Marcia. Again, that is the fiance of Len. She's the one who is initially blamed for the theft, and it's not that Joanna Burton blamed her. It's not even that the police blamed her, but by Cy Baxter, who was another jeweler who knew that Joanna had taken her necklace to Marcia. And also Marcia used to work for Cy, so he's got a couple issues with Marcia. So he's the one who assumes that Marcia is responsible for this theft. And speaking of him, we've got Cy Baxter. So he's also a jeweler in the community who is the one who believes Marcia is responsible. And he has an assistant named Rachel. Rachel apparently doesn't have a last name in the book. And she's kind of put down by Cy a little bit, but also Nancy observes some sort of suspicious behavior with her and Len. So that, again, is Marcia's fiance. And then we learn later on that there are ties to this theft relating to Rachel. But again, we'll get to that. Then we have Stephanie Cook. This is, again, the agent for Joanna Burton. She's the one who gets to Joanna's property and is concerned that no one's answering the gate and insists that they be let in. Then we have Morgan Fowler, who is from Seaside Security. So he's a guard, but he also has ambitions to be an actor. So he has an opportunity to, rub shoulders with some famous people like Joanna Burton, as well as her agent, Stephanie. And then finally, of course, there's Joanna Burton, who isn't in the story for very long. She does die fairly early in the book, but she is the one who claims that her diamonds were stolen, and then she's found at the base of a cliff, possibly pushed, possibly tripped, to be investigated. So Nancy and primarily George are the ones searching for answers. Bess is kind of busy because Ted, again being possessive, doesn't really give her the opportunity to help Nancy and George with their case, or even just spend time with them. So they are continuing to interrogate individuals. But then Nancy has a theory one evening. She realizes that Joanna had this plan to be part of a movie and she was going to back it. But if she wasn't able to pay her bills, how was she going to back this movie? And it occurs to her that Joanna probably stole her own diamonds to create an insurance claim so that she could get that money, as well as actually sell the diamonds. So she decides to investigate this possibility and wants to search her house. But George is off and Bess is busy, so she goes on her own to Joanna Burton's home. But what she uncovers is that she's not the only one searching the house for the diamonds, and she runs into Stephanie, who tells her that it was an accident. She didn't mean to kill Joanna, but yes, there was this plan to create this insurance claim by faking the theft of the diamonds. However, Joanna decided to back out of this plan when she learned that Marcia might take the fall. She didn't intend for her to be blamed for this crime. And Stephanie had tried to convince her not to back out of this plan, not to go to the police, and in her frustration pushed Joanna, and she fell. So it was an accident, but still murder. And as far as Rachel's involvement, so Stephanie knew her from working in Hollywood previously, and without getting into too many details, she basically blackmails Rachel into swapping out the diamonds. And she creates a story. She says that they had planned to have a duplicate or replication of the necklace made, but they didn't have one yet, and Joanna was a little nervous about the safety of the diamonds, so she wanted them removed with fakes put in. And Rachel goes along with this plan, but she is very suspicious, but she's being blackmailed to do it, so she doesn't feel safe even going to the police about it. And on top of that, Morgan then gets involved because with Joanna dead, there's now an opportunity for him to take over that role that she was going to have in a film. And Stephanie uses him. She gets him to do her dirty work to try and stop Nancy from solving the case. So Stephanie is ultimately the mastermind and gets a few other people involved, some more so than others. So that is Diamond Deceit. Now let's look at the game Mystery of the Seven Keys. This is game number 34 of the Nancy Drew Adventure series. Nancy in this investigation travels to Prague to help recover jewels stolen from a necklace and also replaced with fakes. So while Nancy's investigating this, she learns a lot about Prague. She learns about its rich history, including legend of these 7 keys that help protect the city's crown jewels. And she also learns about other recent jewel thefts in the city of 100 Spires. So these are at exhibits. And so Nancy's wondering, is there a grander plot here? This is not the first case that gems have gone missing. So what's really going on here? It seems like Adela, who is the person who invited Nancy, is not the only victim. And jewels are not the only treasures, we could say, in Prague that Nancy investigates and learns about. She learns the histories of alchemy, which has a really huge history. It's quite intensive in Prague. She learns about marionette theater and puppeteering. She gets to help out with that. And she's learning more about the growing digital world and cybersecurity. She also learns about other threats from groups such as Residente, which is sort of a historic underground secret group trying to preserve Prague's history and doesn't necessarily have a positive reputation. And she also learns about an online threat with hacking going on. So our game has quite a few characters as well. So we'll start with Adela Czarna. She is a young woman who has asked Nancy to help look into her case of missing gems from this necklace. Then we have Patricia Vitkovci, and I might be mispronouncing these, I do apologize. Despite hearing them in the game, I haven't quite got them down yet. And Patricia is the owner of the Hunga Kunstler Cafe, and she is a dear friend to Adela, and she kind of helps her feel comfortable with getting Nancy on board to help solve this case. And she's a source of information for Nancy and always willing to provide insight and help with riddles. Then we have Oscar Dvorak, who is a curator at Prague Castle and the exhibitions that are there. Vladena Zlati is a friend of Adela. She works in the gem industry. She does appraisals. So she's got quite a bit of knowledge as far as gems and jewelry go. Then we have Elka, or Eliška Strojnik, but we just know her as Elka. She's a young woman studying computer science. She's really into the cyber world and the internet, and she helps Nancy out with learning a bit about cybersecurity. Then we have her grandfather, Marek Strojnik, who is sort of the opposite of Elka. He's not quite into modern technology. He prefers the old and the past and preserving what once was. Next we have Radek Nipovim, who is a young man sort of around Elka's age, also very passionate about Prague's history, and he's a puppeteer. He runs a marionette theater in the castle courtyard. Next is Leo Sokol, who is the dean of St. Vitus Cathedral. We don't see him very often, but he does have an important role to play in helping to preserve the security of the crown jewels. And then finally, we have a phone contact we briefly see at the end of the game, Agent Zane Garrett. So his specialty really is in gems and jewelry, and he's a contact through the Hardy Boys. So they connect him and Nancy together to work on this case. So as Nancy is going through alibis and looking into the suspects who Adela gives her, she's learning about Prague and its history. This is looking at not just the gems, crown jewels, but also alchemy and these old groups. And what she learns is that Residente still exists, and both Marek and Radek are involved. And They do frighten Nancy by stalking her in the city's tunnels, but this is because they're trying to protect the city and its history. And in the end, they wind up enlisting her for help because they are being blackmailed by Lutkaji, which is a cybercrime organization, basically. And as far as that's concerned, Elka is involved with them, and this is because she's sort of out for revenge for her mother's death. She blames Residente, but also feels like her mom was a criminal, so as she's looking into that, she's kind of picking up where she left off. It's sort of a misplaced revenge. And then she's also working with Vladena, who is behind the theft. She's the one who swapped the gems. And she really wants to have this esteem for having possessed the noble's greatest treasure, which are the crown jewels. So she plans to swap Adela's jewels for the real crown jewels. And she needs Leo Sokol for this, so she kidnaps him. So it's quite a complex story. We've got jewels, we've got alchemy, which I haven't really talked about, I've mentioned here, but alchemy comes into this game a lot. And cybercrime is in there, and this grander heist of the crown jewels. So there's a lot in the game. So with that, let's start the actual comparison. So I'm starting with our title like I normally do. So they are different titles between our book and game. The book is called Diamond Deceit, whereas the game is Mystery of the Seven Keys. I think Diamond Deceit might have been a fine title for the game, although we're looking at more than just diamonds. So changing it to be something more about gems or anything to do with the jewelry theft makes sense. However, the story does expand on more than just the jewel theft, which I'll talk about in a moment when I get to storyline. So the title, Mystery of the Seven Keys, is quite fitting because we're looking at this grander scheme, which involves these 7 keys to access the crown jewels. So we can understand, I think, why Her Interactive changed the title and chose the title that they used. So next is storyline. So Nancy tries to solve a case of stolen diamonds from a movie star's necklace. That is a very simple statement of what the plot is for the book. And it's very similar for the game. Nancy investigates stolen diamonds from a necklace while also trying to prevent the theft of Prague's crown jewels. So it's not just this theft from a necklace, but it is, again, a grander scheme. I might keep using that set of words, that descriptor, for our storyline. We've got even more going on, a grander plot. Our locations are next, and they are quite different. Our book is set in the United States in Carmel, California, whereas the game takes place in Europe, in Czech Republic, specifically the city of Prague. So now let's break down characters. I am actually kind of stupidly excited about this. For those who've been following and listening to my other comparison videos, the last, several have been really difficult to do, especially with regard to characters, because there hasn't been overlap. All the characters are pretty much unique between book and game. That is not the case with Diamond Deceit and Mystery of the Seven Keys, which I'm so happy about. There's a fair bit of overlap. So let's start with Joanna and Adela. So this is the individual whose necklace has been tampered with and the gems stolen and replaced with fakes. So we'll start by looking at Joanna from the book. She's a movie star, and she has essentially run out of money, and she's the one who fakes the theft of her necklace's diamonds. And then she winds up deceased. We don't have the death storyline with Adela or any character in the game. In the game, Adela is a young woman who's done really well for herself. She's pretty savvy as a businesswoman. Many actually assume that she's noble because of how well she's done. She has money, but she's earned it through the work she's done. She hasn't inherited it. And this necklace that she has came into her family during the war, and she has principles, which I think is a really big, important part to note about Adela. And not only does she want to retrieve the gems that were stolen from her necklace, but she also wants to then return this completed necklace to its rightful owner, the people who gave it to her family during the war, who she believes shouldn't have had to give it to her family in order for safe passage and safety. Whereas Joanna is a little bit more full of herself and wants to help herself, hence why she fakes this theft. So as far as personalities and motivations go, they're quite different, but both of these people ask for help and their necklace has been tampered with. Gems stolen, replaced with fakes. Our next characters, we have a few here. So we're looking at Vladena from the game, and I feel that she's based off of two of the book characters, Stephanie and Marcia. And those two are very different characters, but together they've made Vladena. So we'll start with the book. So we're looking at Stephanie, who is a close friend, as well as the agent to Joanna. And she helps with plotting this gem switch. She blackmails Rachel to remove the diamonds, and she's also responsible for that death that I've already mentioned of Joanna. So she's kind of our ultimate baddie. But then we look at Marcia, also from the book. She's a local jeweler who is blamed for the theft, but she's not actually involved in any crime. She did handle the necklace because she was asked to redesign the setting for it, but that's it. So if we take a look at her gem and jewelry background with Stephanie's plotting, that's how we get Vladena. She's a friend of Adela, just like Stephanie is a friend to Joanna, and she actually switches the gems herself. And that's with the intention of then swapping those gems with those for the crown jewels. Again, complicated storyline. In addition to that, she kidnaps Leo to help her access the jewels. And in addition to all that, she works with Elka in order to achieve her goal. So I think it's safe to say that there's a pretty clear combination of Stephanie and Marcia to create Vladena. And we have a few more characters that go together, which is great. So for Elka, we can say she's derived from both Morgan and Rachel from the book. So these are individuals who are involved with this plot in some way. So if we start with book characters, we're actually going to start with Rachel, whose role is a little bit more minor. And she's really an unwilling participant. She's been blackmailed by Stephanie to remove the diamonds from the necklace. So that's really her role. Morgan, on the other hand, is more of a willing participant. He's an accomplice to Stephanie, and he hopes to get an acting job as a result of helping her out and with Joanna's death. So, again, helping with the plot in some way. Now, Elka, also involved with the plot. Her role is fairly different from Morgan and Rachel, but I'm trying to make these characters overlap. And she has her own reasons for helping Vladena, kind of like Morgan. His reason for helping Stephanie is not that he's going to get rich from selling the diamonds or faking their theft, but to get into the film business, right? So that's his motivator. Whereas for Elka, it's really revenge against Residente, and she's working for Lukaji in doing so. So that's really it for our overlapping characters. Then we have two characters who are kind of book only. So we'll start with Ted. So this is that friend of Bess and manager of the Café de Carmel, and he constantly wants and expects Bess to be helping him at the restaurant. He's really jealous of the time that she gives to her friends. So he's an obstacle, basically, for Bess being able to help with the investigation. And a big red flag, which I'll talk about later. And then we have Len. He's the fiance of Marcia and a friend of Ted. He owns a landscaping business. He's the one who asks Nancy to investigate and prove Marcia's innocence. He, however, did handle the necklace that belonged to Joanna. So he is a suspect partly because of that. He did handle this necklace after Marcia had finished, setting it. So Nancy kind of wonders, did he take that opportunity to remove the gems? He was seen, or at least his vehicle was seen, leaving the vicinity of her home shortly before she's found dead. This is Joanna, I should say. And he also is known to have severe trouble with his anger. As described earlier, it's quite explosive. And so he's a bit of a red flag as far as a partner too, thinking about Len and Ted together. Something, again, I'll talk about at the end of this video, but both sort of questionable gentlemen, we'll put it that way. So I'll move on from book-only characters to the last four from the game, or game-only characters. So we've got Oscar, who's a curator at Prague Castle. He wants to basically be the head of overseeing every aspect of exhibit preparations, and he's really quite pushy about that. He always wants to be involved. He's constantly trying to get a hold of Leo so that he can oversee things, and Leo's assistant is not letting him get involved. And Adela listed him as a potential suspect for the gem theft. He's also a great source of information for Nancy because of this exhibit he's put together and his knowledge from having done so. It's a really great opportunity for Nancy to learn about alchemy and the crown jewels and various other aspects of Prague history. Next, we'll look at Merrick, so grandfather of Elka. He really fondly remembers the past of Prague, what life used to be, and he's actively working to preserve it through his work with Residente. Then he, along with Radek, do try to scare off Nancy, and it's not meant to be malicious or to endanger her, but really to actually kind of keep her safe and to keep their work safe. And sort of reluctantly, he gets on board with having Nancy help them out when Radek sort of spills the beans. Well, they both kind of spill the beans unintentionally about being part of Residente, and that they're being blackmailed by sorry, I don't think I said that right. Blackmailed by Lutkadi for their involvement with Residente. So speaking of Radek, we talk about him next. He's a puppeteer. He's very passionate about Prague's history. He puts on little shows at his marionette theater telling the history of Prague. And he, with Merrick, strive to protect the city's past. And again, he wants to keep Nancy safe by trying to scare her off. He dresses up in this night costume, which is really odd, and wants her to keep away from what's really going on, but then suggests that maybe she can help. And then finally, we have Leo, who is the Dean of St. Vitus Cathedral. He's one of the 7 key holders. So there were 7 keys to protect those crown jewels. So he's the possessor of one of them. And he is kidnapped by Vladena because there's also a biometric scanner. And in order to then get past that locked door, Vladena needed one of the key holders. So she kidnaps Leo to use to get past that biometric portion. Which then creates access to the crown jewels. So that's it for characters. Just the last few things are more elements from the 2 stories. So we'll start with jewel theft, and this is sort of the main thing where we see the overlap. Both stories center on a theft of jewels from a necklace. In the book, it's a diamond necklace belonging to a movie star, whereas for the game, the necklace belonged to a young businesswoman and was composed of various gems, and those gems are going to be used to replace crown jewels. So it's like a jewel theft on top of another jewel theft. It's a little bit more intense in the game. Then we have a few things that are game only. So Czech history, this has been incorporated into the game. So we've got the history of Czech Republic playing a very central role, again, relating to the crown jewels. That has to do with Prague's history. And just learning also about alchemy and puppeteering theater. And we've got the opportunity to learn some of the Czech language. So that's really highly involved in our game, but it has no relation to the book whatsoever. As well as the element of cybercrime. This is not from the book at all. It's created for the game. So we sort of dive into online criminal activity. We learn a bit about internet safety and hacking and just general security. And the other way it's incorporated into the game is that it's used to track Nancy as well as to hack into systems. So with that, it's time to conclude. So our 1993 novel and the 2024 game share a central storyline, the theft of gems from a necklace. Pretty basic and straightforward, which is great to see that similarity is maintained throughout both stories. I appreciate that so much. And while the novel focuses on the disappearance of those diamonds and the various jewelers in the community, the game expands upon this story to incorporate Prague and a grander history that involves the city's crown jewels. Then who stole the gems and where they're hidden vary considerably between the 2 stories. And I've chosen not to go into the endings. I think it's more fun to read the book and play the game to find out how those endings wrap up. But what we do have as far as what I'm willing to share about the ending is sort of who's involved. And I've already gone over these. So for the book, it's a victim and friend guilty. So our victim, of course, Joanna, she's part of this plot to steal her own, I say steal in air quotes, steal her own diamonds, with her agent and friend Stephanie also being the main person behind this plot. She's actually the one who came up with this idea. So that's who's involved with the theft in the book, whereas in the game, the perpetrator is a jeweler friend, as well as this tech-savvy young woman, that being Elka. So her interactive stayed true to the original plot from the novel. They did a really great job of that, while also incorporating educational elements relating to Czech history and culture, and creating a deeper, albeit in my opinion, overly complicated storyline. But overall, I appreciate how they managed to incorporate the main storyline, that plot from the book, and turned it into a game, even though the game in many ways is very different. So there ends my comparison for Diamond Deceit and Mystery of the Seven Keys. This was really fun to do because I was able to do a true comparison. Again, the storyline was the same between the two stories, although, like I've said a few times, the game goes beyond just the plot of gems stolen from a necklace. But yeah, it was done really well. And characters, that was the other point I was going to make. The characters actually overlapped, which was a wonderful thing to see. I remember reading this book when I read it this last time, because I'd read it, I don't know how many years ago, but I do remember as I was reading it, I thought, well, I remember Bess planning to move, and learning about the ending and where the diamonds are hidden in the book. I remembered that. I thought that was really neat. So I do encourage people to read this book. It's kind of fun. So a complicated plot though for the game, and I don't actually like the game. I've come to appreciate the storyline more, but the first time I played it, I was supremely, well, I shouldn't say just the first time, every time I've played it, I've been supremely irritated by maneuvering and just how it's designed. I think that sadly was done really poorly. But I do like the idea that Her Interactive had to go beyond just the theft and gave us an opportunity to learn about another country and its history. And I always appreciate that about the games. I do think that it was a bit too much though. So what I was going to say before is the first time I played this game, I couldn't really keep track of what was going on. There were too many things. So we had the gem theft. We had this smoke monster, which was a knight, which was weird. Learning about cybersecurity, and then the creepy hacking image that showed up on the computer, Residente, plus all this history and learning about alchemy, which is not unique to this game. It was just a lot going on, plus all these characters and trying to keep track of who's who and where can I find them. It took me so long to find Leo the first time I played this game. But anyways, or to figure out where his office was. So I appreciate the effort that Her Interactive put in, but I think they overcomplicated it. And that is one of the reasons I don't actually like the game. Again, I can appreciate the storyline and the attempt, but the delivery wasn't great. I think the execution would have been far improved if they did everything differently as far as the engine's concerned, but didn't have quite so much in. Like if they eliminated the cybercrime story, I think that might have helped, because that kind of felt like it came out of left field. I don't think it was necessary for the purpose of telling the story, and just added more elements than was needed. So that's my view. But overall, as from a comparison perspective, Her Interactive did a really good job. I'm not talking about the content just of the game, but just, again, comparing book to game and what that adaptation is like and how well it was achieved. Overall, I think Her Interactive did a really good job. So it was nice to have a book and game where I could do a true comparison again. It's been a really long time. And before I wrap things up, I need to go back to the 2 red flags I mentioned I kept saying I was going to come back to, and I don't want to forget to. So I'd mentioned for both Ted and Len some negative characteristics of them. So Ted is quite possessive of Bess. He is very controlling. He doesn't like it when she spends time with other people. He wants her to be devoted to the cafe. And Len is a red flag in terms of his anger outbursts. This is a concern that his fiance has, and he's very aware of it. He actually says in the book that he sort of not really rolls his eyes, but is saying, that's how I let off steam, is by kind of verbally yelling and saying things to vent his frustrations. But these are unhealthy characteristics, and I think it's important to talk about this, give you guys a PSA in my comparison video that those are not good signs in a partner, and it's really important to be able to pick up on these things, because if they're exhibiting behaviors like that, that suggests that they're going to be an unhealthy partner and you're going to be in an unhealthy relationship. Not necessarily because of things you yourself have done, but because of the other person's behavior. And I mean, I talk about this a lot with my work. And so reading this book, I was like, oh, this is what I am talking to kids about all the time right now. And so I might as well bring it up here, but being very aware. Look for your red flags, know what your green flags are. Be aware of what makes healthy or makes a relationship healthy versus unhealthy. So possessiveness, control, not letting a person be themselves or being able to do what they want is not a positive quality. And letting your anger out in a way that scares other people and that worries other people is also unhealthy. Keep in mind, anger is a normal emotion. They're all normal. There's nothing positive and negative about anger. What matters is how we display it and how we let it out. And if we become so explosive that we're scaring people, then that's not a healthy approach to releasing our anger. So I did want to just make sure that I touched on those red flags, have you guys aware of what to look out for, keep you guys safe out in the world and your relationships, romantic or otherwise. This goes for friends as well and family members. So be very aware of what's not safe and how to be safe and what to look for and what to avoid. All right, this has been a really long comparison video, so I'm going to leave it there. Thank you very much for watching and listening. I hope this was insightful and interesting, and I hope you guys are also kind of stoked knowing that Turn Interactive took more of the elements from their source material than they had been in the last many games. So thanks again. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Bye-bye.